Alright, hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing one of my favorite videos to film at the end of every single year, and that is my top books of the year. I feel like 2024 was an interesting reading year. I definitely have a lot of books that I'm going to be talking about today that I really loved, but I feel like overall it wasn't like the best reading year I've had. I dare say it's one of the worst, but I still found some really good stuff this year, so I want to sit down and talk about it with you guys today. I'm going to be structuring this the same way I structured my top books of the year video last year, which is going to be doing 3 honorable mentions, and then I will be moving into my official top 5 books, which I do have ranked. So I don't think this video needs any other introduction. So let's get into my 3 honorable mentions. So the first one that I want to talk about is The Invocations by Crystal Sutherland. This is a YA thrillery horror type of book that also deals with witchcraft, which I just absolutely loved. I read this book back in April when I was so desperately craving fall, and it just did so many things that I needed in that time, and I just adored this book. Basically, this book is following 3 main characters, one of whom is trying to resurrect her sister who died recently, another of whom has 3 demons tied to her soul and is slowly turning necrotic, and one who is a witch. So the first 2 characters end up seeking out the witch for help with their current predicaments. So this book is following the 3 of them as they are kind of working out their personal problems, as well as starting to deal with this larger situation that is at hand, because there is a supernatural serial killer that is on the loose that is targeting women who have been involved in witchcraft. So we're kind of seeing how they get pulled into that like grander scheme as well, and I just loved everything about this book. I thought the plotting was really good. It was really fast-paced and fun. There were definitely some creepy moments as well as just some funny moments with our 3 main characters. I also absolutely love Crystal Sutherland's writing. It is so eerie and unsettling, but very descriptive in kind of a grotesque way at times. There were so many descriptions of like mold and things being really moist, and somebody's basement was literally filled with pus, which sounds disgusting, and it was actually. There's actually no excuse for that. I just feel like the way she writes really evokes such a visceral reaction from me, because some things are like really beautiful and some things are like really scary. And I feel like that's just the perfect mix and something that I absolutely love in like spooky books. I also really enjoyed following these 3 main characters. I thought their dynamic was really great, and seeing it grow over the course of the book was really enjoyable. I also really enjoyed the general themes to this book because it has very overt like feminist, female empowerment, female rage kind of vibes to it, because all of the women that are being targeted by the supernatural killer were involved with witchcraft because they were trying to take back some semblance of control in their own lives. So this book just had everything that I love. It is also incredibly atmospheric. It takes place in kind of late October to early November, which I was obviously a big fan of, and I cannot wait to see what Crystal Sutherland comes out with next, because I will be picking it up and hopefully loving it. Then the next book that I want to talk about I don't currently have a physical copy of because I initially read it from the library, but that is Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. This is a sci-fi horror kind of book, and it has definitely made me realize that I need to read more sci-fi horror, because from the couple of books that I've read that kind of fall into that blend of genres, I have loved them. So definitely a goal for 2025 is to kind of look into those. But this one was just so fascinating. It is a book that focuses on killer mermaids, and that is definitely a subject that I have never encountered in a book before, but I actually loved so much. This book opens up by telling you about this research expedition that was done over the Mariana Trench a couple of years ago that nobody came back from. And they were filming a documentary of this research expedition at the time, and a lot of the footage has been lost, but some of the footage did make it back to the general public, and it does kind of look like killer mermaids climbed aboard this ship and brutally eviscerated everybody. So a lot of people believe this is a hoax, but there are certainly a lot of people who don't believe this is a hoax. So then a couple of years later, they are sending out another kind of research expedition team in the attempt to prove or disprove the existence of said killer mermaids. I definitely had some issues with this book, mainly in how everything wrapped up. I don't think I actually gave this book 5 stars. I think it's a really close to a 5-star read though. But this is definitely one of my most memorable reading experiences of the year. I just had such a blast reading this book. One of my favorite parts of this story, and one of the reasons I liked it so much though, was all of the scientific information that was being presented to you, because even though it deals with killer mermaids, which presumably do not exist, who am I to say if they do or do not, but it does actually have a lot of factual information in it about sea life. So even though like 99% of this book is fiction. There is that one little percent that actually does give you some kind of interesting information about what lives in the depths of the ocean, which I really enjoyed. But kind of going off of that, my favorite part of all of the information that you're given in this book is that there's a somewhat convincing biological breakdown of like these mermaids' bodies and how they exist in the water. I mean, I don't know anything about marine biology in the slightest, so like don't take my word for it. But if you don't know anything about it seems so real, and it adds an element of authenticity that just amps up the horror elements that are in this book, which I just really enjoyed. I also really enjoyed the way that this book was told, because in the beginning you're kind of following a couple of different points of view, but then as the book goes on, you're getting more and more points of view from the people that are on this ship as they are experiencing these atrocities that are happening. And at some point it started bouncing back and forth between all of them, which I just felt like made for a very engaging reading experience, because you would learn something in one POV, then you would go to this one and learn something else, and then there would be a cliffhanger in this one, and then it was just so cool. I definitely plan on reading Mira Grant's book that is coming out in May of 2025, I think. It's called Overgrowth, and I think it has to do with like plant horror or something to that effect, but I can't wait because I just want to see what I think of it. I feel like I might really like it. And then lastly, for my honorable mentions, I do have a recent read, and that is obviously The Sword of Kayan by Emma Wong. This is honestly such an excellent high fantasy standalone that absolutely packs a punch. It was such an emotional roller coaster, but I loved it so much. This is set on a peninsula called the Sword of Kayan, and we are following two main points of view, a mother and a son, Misaki and Mamoru. And obviously throughout this book, we are following them as they are kind of dealing with some more personal issues, as well as like the big issue of the fact that there are whisperings of a war coming to the peninsula. So with Misaki's point of view, we find out that she used to be this great warrior, but ever since she got married and had kids, it hasn't really been socially acceptable for her to embrace that part of her life anymore, which you can definitely tell is trying for her. You can definitely tell that something is missing for her. So when an attack comes to the peninsula and she kind of has to step in and protect her loved ones, it's a really cool moment. I feel like she has so many epic moments in this story, because seeing her being able to finally jump back into that role is incredibly satisfying. And then with Mamoru, you're kind of following him as he is realizing a lot of things about the government. He finds out that a lot of the Kaiganese people have been fed a lot of propaganda over the years, and you can kind of see his growing mistrust in the government, as well as kind of this village's growing mistrust as well. So I just feel like this was the perfect fantasy book for me. It has really interesting characters with great character arcs. It has great combat scenes. I loved a lot of the combat scenes in this. Emma Wong just has a way of writing them that makes you feel like you are in this moment, which is a good thing and a bad thing, because on one hand it's really cool, but on the other hand, she does not shy away from showing you the atrocities of this war and how that is impacting the people of this village. I also really enjoyed the world building and the politics. I thought both of those were fascinating, as well as the magic system, which is kind of based on an elemental magic system. So this book really is just like the perfect fantasy standalone for me personally, and I would highly recommend if you guys have been hearing about it and maybe thinking about picking it up. I thought it was excellent. All right, so those are my 3 honorable mentions. Now it is time to move into my top 5, which I'm so excited about. Not that I wasn't excited about those, but like I'm just a little bit more excited about these. So the first thing that I want to talk about is actually a series, because there's no way I could make my top 5 and not talk about this series. And that is obviously Mistborn Era 2. I don't think any of these books like individually would really end up on my top 5, like maybe The Bands of Mourning, I'm not sure. But Mistborn Era 2 as a whole was definitely one of the highlights of my year, and I have to talk about it. I just think it's so funny though, because I initially was not planning on reading Mistborn Era 2 because I had preconceived notions. They were incorrect, but wow, am I glad that I actually picked it up, because it was exceptional. I feel like Mistborn Era 2 is just the perfect blend of action, adventure, but it's got really great characters with really great character arcs, and it also builds really well on the world you already know from Mistborn Era 1. Obviously the Mistborn magic system is also just so cool. I also really enjoyed Era 2 because it takes place like 300 years after the events of Era 1, I think. So to see the characters in this one kind of referencing the things that happened in the first era of Mistborn, kind of in a reverent way, like the characters of Era 1 are like these mythical beings, I just thought was so cool. I also just absolutely loved the characters in Era 2. I think initially I was kind of like, you know, they're fine. But as the series went on, I was like, wait, this is actually such a solid cast of characters. Wax is a very kind of stern, solemn, serious man, and then you have Wayne, who is a character, shall we say. I liked Wayne. He does get on my nerves a little bit, but he definitely adds some moments of levity to the series. And then my favorite character, potentially in all of the Cosmere, Steris. I love her so much. Initially, I didn't really think much of Steris. Her and Wax were kind of just thrown into this arranged marriage situation, and neither of them really thought much about it. But as the books progressed and you got to know a little bit more about Steris, I just came to respect and admire her so much. She definitely has a lot of anxious tendencies, but seeing how she kind of wielded them and used them to her advantage advantage, I thought was so well done. And I just really liked Era 2. It was so good. I think I like Era 2 more than I like Era 1, like as a whole. So do it that way you will, but Era 2 was so good. Then moving on to number 4, I have The Ornithologist Field Guide to Love by India Holton. Truly, I don't have anything like deep to say about this book, aside from the fact that it was just a delight. It was so cute. This is a historical fantasy-ish romance rom-com situation that has just the absolute ridiculous writing that I have come to expect and love from India Holton. Basically, this book is following rival ornithologists as they enter this competition where they have to find this rare bird, and our two main characters, Beth and Devon, kind of end up teaming up in a way, and they end up traveling together. And I love a traveling fantasy romance-esque story. It's always so good, especially when they're like a little bit, you know, dubious of each other. It's always so fun. So I really loved how their romance developed over the course of this book. It was definitely like very silly, very bantery, but you can also see that both of them definitely had like some trust issues, and kind of seeing them overcome those and come together was just so nice. I also really loved the magical birds. I thought that was a fun aspect, definitely something that I had never really experienced in a book before. This book also has some great like academic kind of vibes to it because our two main characters are ornithologists and they are really into birds. Let me tell you. But something that I thought was so cute was like both of them love birds, but they've never really met somebody that shares that passion for ornithology. So when they found that in each other, I was like, wait, this is so cute. And it's just so much fun. Like, I absolutely loved this. I cannot wait for the second one in the series that is coming out in March. I will be eating it up and hopefully loving it as much as I loved this one. Then moving into spot 3, I have A Grave Robbery by Deanna Raybourn. This is the 9th installment in the Veronica Speedwell series. I have probably talked your ear off about it already, and for that I'm sorry, so I'll keep this brief. But if you guys, for whatever reason, don't know, this is a historical romance mystery kind of series that is following our two main characters as they go throughout Victorian London solving mysteries. I think the main thing that has really shot this book to the top of my favorite books of the year is the mystery aspect to it, because I already know I love Veronica and Stoker. I'll talk about them in a second, as if I need to. But I really loved the mystery in this one. I found it to be one of my favorites in the series. It definitely has like a more macabre, spooky vibe to it, so I feel like it was kind of like the intersection of my favorite things in books, you know? Because it's a historical romance mystery, and it's also spooky and eerie, so I was just eating it up the whole time, honestly. Basically, in this book, our two main characters are presented with this wax figure that Stoker is going to fit with a mechanism that makes it look like it's breathing, and he's like, all right, cool, I can do this. But he goes to cut into this wax figure, which, you know, you would presume is actually a wax figure. He realizes that it is a dead woman that has been preserved to make it look like she is a wax figure. So obviously the rest of the book is following Veronica and Stoker as they are trying to figure out who did this, why they did this, how they did this, when they did this, just all of the who, what, when, where, why, how, all of it. And I loved it. I loved every aspect to it. There also is some grave robbing that does go on in this book. The title does not lie, and I loved that part as well. But another thing that really stuck out to me in this book was the side characters, because there are quite a few side characters that like come in and out of the series as it goes on. But the two side characters that I love the most were heavily featured in this book, so seeing them work together with Veronica and Stoker to solve this mystery, I thought was so fun. Their group dynamic was great. But obviously Veronica and Stoker were absolutely stunning in this book. Every single book kind of has those moments where they are just declaring their undying love and obsession with each other, and I eat it up every time. But specifically with one of our characters, I really liked how Stoker was kind of interacting with this mystery, because you could tell he felt very deeply for this woman, and through that you kind of got a little bit more of a glimpse into his past. I feel like throughout the series, you definitely learn more and more about Stoker, but still you don't know quite as much about him as you know about, like, Veronica's past. So I just really enjoyed that and getting to see a little bit of a different side to him as well. And this was just such an excellent entry in the series. If you guys have not read Veronica Speedwell, I don't know what you're doing, but, like, it is one of my top favorite series. Maybe, like, my third, I was gonna say it's my third favorite series, but it's also the third one on this list, so how fortuitous is that? Then moving into spot 2, I do have another Brandon Sanderson book, and that is Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. This was one of the secret projects that he released last year, and it was just so good, honestly. Basically, this book is following our two main characters, Yumi and Painter. They kind of live in two different worlds. Like, literally, they live on two different worlds. Painter lives in this very reminiscent of our world metropolitan area where he works as something called a nightmare painter, where he goes around and he stops nightmares from terrorizing the city, basically. And then in our other point of view, we are following Yumi, who is kind of a spiritual figure in this, like, historical Korea-inspired environment, and they end up in, like, a Freaky Friday body swap kind of situation. And these two characters are just so awkward but so endearing at the same time, so watching them kind of deal with this incredibly odd situation was such a delight. I also just really enjoyed how different this felt from his other books in the Cosmere while still feeling very Sanderson-esque. It has a lot of Asian influences in it, which I thought were really cool, and I also really loved the magic systems that were going on in this book as well. This book also has some like twists and turns in it. I feel like, you know, you spend a little bit of the book kind of focusing on patron Yumi. There is also a romance that develops between the two of them, which was adorable, honestly. But then when you get to the end of the book, you remember like, oh yeah, this is still a Brandon Sanderson book. So kind of seeing some things be revealed and learning things about the worlds that these are set on was so cool. I also absolutely loved the narrator of this book. I feel like it is just such a good choice to have this specific character narrate this book, because this would have been a good story on its own, but having this character add in his commentary, add in his little snarky remarks and whatnot every now and then was, again, just a delight. This book was just a delight overall. I had the best time reading it, and I want to do a reread. I won't, but I want to. Well, I mean, I will eventually. Whatever, you guys know what I mean. And then we have finally arrived at my top favorite book of the year, which should honestly come as a surprise to nobody, because again, I've talked about this a lot. But it's obviously Emily Wilde's Map of the Other Lands by Heather Fawcett. Oh my god, it was so good. It was so good. If you guys don't know, this is the second book in the Emily Wilde series, and it is following our main character, Emily Wilde, who works as a triadologist, I believe, which basically means she studies Fae and she is a professor at Cambridge and she like teaches dryadology courses, which I would love to take one. I'll never be able to, but I'd love to. But on the first book, we see her and her kind of rival co-worker Wendell going on this expedition so she can write her Encyclopedia of Fairies. But in this one, we see them embarking on yet another expedition as she is writing her map of the other lands, which is just like a map of the fairy lands. So they go to the Alps. I absolutely loved the setting. I also feel like Heather Fawcett's writing is so beautiful and it's so descriptive. I felt like I was in this like snowy mountainous area. It was just so quaint, so beautiful. They were in this like small village at the base of the Alps. Oh, so good. I also just really love our two main characters, Emily and Wendell. They have the perfect dynamic because they are so different to each other. Emily is a kind of curmudgeonly, socially awkward type of person, so she's definitely very relatable in that aspect, whereas Wendell is definitely not. He's very bubbly, he's very flamboyant, he's definitely an extrovert, so they definitely clash a lot, but as the series progresses, you see them kind of grow closer, maybe develop a romance. It's like the perfect opposites attract kind of thing, and it's so good. I also really love the side characters that were brought into this one as well, because Emily's niece Ariadne joins them for this expedition, and she is so excited and passionate about dryadology, so I loved what she added to it. And then also this like department head joined them as well, and he kind of has a more like serious, stern kind of facade, but as the book progresses, again, you kind of see it's a little bit more than that, and just seeing the group dynamic develop over the course of the book was very enjoyable. I also have said this a million times, but I love the depiction of the Fae in this story because they are very like tricksy, evil, malevolent beings, and I love that so much because it just causes so many problems for our characters. And then also, I feel like I just have so many individual things to say about this book, but like I just loved it so much. I really loved what this book provided in terms of Wendell's backstory. I feel like due to some places our characters ended up going, you kind of got to see a little bit more about what his life was like growing up and like where he comes from and that kind of stuff, which you don't get in the first book for the most part, so I thought that was really cool as well. And then I also just loved the wintry fall atmosphere in this book. It was so beautiful, so perfect. Again, Heather Fawcett just has like lovely writing that lends itself so well to the whimsy of those times of year, and I was obsessed. I just loved it so much. I think I'm going to be starting a reread of the series as well because the third one comes out in February, and I haven't read the first one in like 2 years, so I think I'm gonna reread the first one, then reread this one because why not? And then I will read the third one. I'll be fresh with the series for the third one, and I cannot wait. It's gonna be so good. So I implore you to read the series. Do it, please. It definitely has like a more academic tone to it in the way that some things are written though, so I'd keep that in mind. I mean, I love that because this book is kind of written, well, both of these books are kind of written as Emily's academic journals, which I think is such a cool idea, and I just love this series so much. It's so good. But with that, those are my top books of 2024. I cannot believe the year is already over. That's crazy, but you know, it's been, as far as these books, it's been a decent reading year. I feel like overall it's been a bit questionable, but I do love these so much. I've had the best time sitting and talking about them with you guys. Obviously, I need to know what your guys' favorite books of the year are. Please let me know. Also, if we share any, let me know that as well. But yeah, we have arrived at the end of the video and the end of the year, because I believe this is the last video that I will be posting in 2024. So obviously I wanted to take a second to thank you guys so much for such a lovely 2024. This was such a great year, just in general and on this channel, which really is all thanks to you guys. I love being able to do this, so I love that you guys enjoy watching my videos as well. So just thank you so much. I hope you all had a great 2024 as well, and happy almost New Year. But with that, I'm gonna go. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you're all having an amazing Monday or whatever day it is that you're watching this video, and I will see you all in 2025. Bye!